Hi everybody, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to talk about the astrology of September. So every month I try to give a few different kinds of updates regarding the astrology of the month ahead. I always write sun sign horoscope columns, so you can always check out my sun sign horoscope columns every month at Astrograph. Astrograph.com, you'll find under the horoscopes tab the different glyphs for all of the 12 signs, and you can always just click on the glyph for your sun sign or your rising sign and read about the month ahead. So that's one of the ways that I talk about the astrology of the month ahead. Just yesterday I actually launched video blog versions of my September horoscopes. So if you go to my YouTube channel, if you just search Adam Elenbaas on YouTube, you'll find video blog versions for all 12 signs. Now they're like 15 to 17 minutes long, somewhere around there. Maybe one peaks at about 20 or so. But all you have to do there is, again, listen to the video for your sun or your rising sign, two most typical that people look at. And so you have written monthly horoscope and a video blog monthly horoscope. The September's horoscopes I don't believe are published yet on Astrograph. They probably will be today or maybe tomorrow. So you can stay tuned for the Astrograph written horoscopes, and then you can check out your video blog horoscope in the meantime. The other thing that I do, which is what we're going to do today, is to give an overview of the month ahead from the mundane standpoint. So what's the difference between mundane forecasting, you might say, and a horoscope column? Well, the basic gist of a horoscope column is that you're reading, again, for your sun sign or your rising sign for the month ahead. And it's a very particular kind of technique that astrologers use to write those or to create those on a video blog, let's say. And the basic idea in those horoscopes is you're taking your sun sign, you're putting it as the first whole sign house in a chart, and then seeing all of the whole sign houses splayed out around the wheel, and then tracking the transits through those houses for the month ahead as though it was a birth chart. Those transits translate into your forecast for the month ahead if you're a Taurus or if you're a Gemini or what have you. And you do the same thing for your rising sign. But the mundane forecast that I'm doing today, that I do monthly, focuses on all of the big transits for the month ahead in a more general sense, not specific, not anchored to a chart. Every month the transits can be read on their own as indicating things that are going to be happening in the news, in the collective, around you, within you. And there's a more general focus on the significations of the planets and their archetypal combinations by aspect. So for example, at the beginning of this month, we're going to start off talking about a Mercury-Venus sextile. That Mercury-Venus sextile is sort of in effect for everybody and has general effects that everyone might notice. The specific way in which you might notice it could be specified by looking at your chart, by looking at a horoscope. Maybe having an astrologer take a look more specifically at each day or each week or each month in the year, you get a more specific version of that. But one of the reasons that I really spend most of my time throughout the year not doing horoscopes but doing mundane forecasting is because a lot of the time the natural significations of the planets and their archetypal combinations are just there in the world around us, almost like you would notice the weather, a rain storm, or a nice sunny day or something like that. You can see it in the news, you can see it in a friend, you can see it in something that's happening in somebody else's life. And so the mundane forecast for the month ahead is really preparing us for what kinds of energies, what kinds of symbols we're going to be seeing in our life, sort of just in the garden variety experiences that we have day to day. So I think it's very useful to have a bit of both. In fact, for 6-7 years now, I've been writing more what you would call mundane forecasts, just looking at the archetypal combinations of the planets day in and day out, year round. It's only in the past year that I've started doing sun sign horoscopes, but it's because I'm trying to make bridges for people who, a lot of people, horoscopes, joking around, people have been saying this. I don't remember if it was on one of Chris Brennan's podcasts or if it was, we just went on and talked about horoscopes, Joe Gleason and myself with Chris Brennan on one of his podcasts. And I believe we were saying that it's like horoscopes are like a gateway drug. The horoscopes are for astrology, it's like a gateway drug. It gets you on the hook and it brings you in to astrology and the language of astrology in a deeper way, which can be, of course, really valuable for your spiritual life. It's a constant reminder of, as I've said almost every time I do a video, astrology is a constant reminder that the universe is a meaningful place, that it's ordered, that there is a divine intentionality to the way that our lives are structured and to the way that events flow and stuff like that. So I'm trying to bridge out doing the monthly horoscopes so that more people can get deeper into astrology and see more than there is to see in just, say, a monthly horoscope column, although I believe that they're very valuable in and of themselves. So anyway, that little introduction aside, let's dive into the astrology for the month of September. So the month really gets going on September 3rd. On September 3rd, right thereabouts, my calculations are I never go down to the minute that these things perfect. And you should also know that any time that I mention a transit, like the one I'm about to talk about, the effects are typically, it's like an umbrella, right? You kind of, it's like on the full moon. On the day of a full moon, you could experience the effects of the full moon from the time you wake up in the morning all the way until the next day. I'll give you a simple example. When we came here to the Outer Banks, where I'm at right now, you see I'm not in my office, we were walking on the beach, and there was a group of people gathering near a sea turtle nest because they were about to hatch in the evening. And we were walking, and this guy said, you should go and see what they're doing down there. There's some sea turtles that are about to hatch. I went, oh, that's cool. And he said, yeah, it's the full moon tonight. And being an astrologer, I was like, well, the full moon was 2 days ago. I didn't say it like that, but I was like, well, the full moon was 2 days ago. But not to like the native eye. You know what I mean? Like, not to a group of sea turtles either, apparently, because the orb or umbrella of the full moon for the naked eye is like 3-4 days where it feels like, oh, the moon is full. And you can't necessarily even tell for at least a couple of days that it's been full, that it will be full, or that it, like that. So same thing for transits. Remember that any transit during the month, give or take a few days on either side, typically, that the effects are most noticeable. So September 3rd, Mercury and Venus are getting together into a sextile. Mercury in Leo, Venus in Libra. First of all, this is a very charming transit. It's the kind of transit where you get an email that delivers some good news. If you're trying to make a deal with somebody, it's the ability to make that deal go smoothly. If you are with friends, it's the good company that seems just sort of magical, and the rare, like totally magical night out where everything's just flowing in conversation and you're exchanging ideas, and there's just this sense of friendliness and excitement in the way that you're sharing in relationships. You got the god of communication meeting up with the goddess of harmony. So whether it's musical, there's a musical quality in the air, or just a natural kind of harmonious element to your relationships and to communication right now, can't go wrong with that. It also is the kind of transit where it's easy to persuade people, so you have to be a little careful that you're not being manipulative. Leo can be very, theatrical and grand and sort of big, and a little extra charm with Venus in the mix. And so the first couple of days of September, good for getting things done, good for finding agreement, good for making deals, good for negotiation, good for getting good news, charm, wit, all of that. But you also, you do want to be careful of the smooth talker and the ability to convince or persuade people of your position. And maybe there's a little selfishness there, so just be careful of that. So from there, September 3rd, those effects lingering around a little bit longer, but you go forward to September 8th. Let's move my chart so I make sure I have. On September 8th, Venus is going to be culminating in the 29th degree of Libra, which is what we call an anaretic degree. And Mars is going to be culminating at the 29th degree of Capricorn, also an anaretic degree. This is a Venus-Mars square. Venus is applying the pressure from the superior position, which means Venus's agenda will be a little bit more dominant. And Venus-Mars squares, first of all, can deliver a certain amount of sexual tension and chemistry that might be pretty exciting for romance and for just that edge of excitement in relationships that is creative or sexual or romantic, just that kind of feeling of chemistry in the air. But it can also be a little bit combustive, right? Quintessential planet of feminine and masculine, or yin and yang, and they're getting together in a square which is of the nature of Mars. So there might be some conflict. Mars, of course, in Capricorn is just nose to the grindstone. It's an exalted place for Mars, very hardworking, very effective at getting things done, sort of soldiering through. But Venus in Libra is again in the superior position, and she's sort of exerting this influence. It says, you can't just bulldoze here. You need some grace, you need some tact, you need some diplomacy, some artfulness, attention to the political what I want to say, social or political environment that you're in. Be minding your P's and Q's. That energy from Venus will be asserting herself pretty strongly over Mars, which could be a good thing. But also, if you need to get something done, how helpful is it to have to, dance around, have some song and dance? You just get the work done. So sometimes we demand and expect too much when a simple, straight, direct, no nonsense path to success would actually be easier. So making simple things that you should go for directly too convoluted or complicated because of some high maintenance needs on the behalf of Venus could also be in effect. But you want to look for that kind of sexual chemistry, creative chemistry, the tension, and maybe some elements of conflicts in relationships with Venus sort of asserting her superior influence over Mars. But they're both empowered planets, so they're going to want to do what they want to do. One way of thinking about planets that's really helpful, planets have natural significations, right? So a planet like Venus wants to do Venetian things. Venus wants to be harmonious. Venus wants to be beautiful. Venus wants to bring things together and unify like that. She wants to confirm and make things grow. Mars, on the other hand, wants to sever, wants to cut, wants to divide, wants to confront. So how able is a planet, or how capable is a planet of doing what comes natural to them? That's what essential dignity is all about. When a planet is in its home sign, it can be itself and do its own thing more naturally and more easily. Just like you can behave more naturally and more easily when you're in your own house, as opposed to being in a different place where you don't speak the language, or at somebody else's house where it's not your property. Planets in the homes of other signs that are not their own, where they're not either in rulership or exaltation, are like guests. They defer to and they behave like the planetary host of the house. So these are two planets, Venus and Mars, right now, that are in their home signs. So when they get into a square with one another, they're less likely to want to compromise. So Venus, peace. Mars, direct, go at it. Doesn't really cut, divide. No need for this artificial need to make everything nice, right? You can feel that tension will be growing. And Venus, though, does have the upper hand, so she's going to be kind of a little bit more dominant in the mix, for better or worse. You think about that around September 8th. Then on September 9th, right away afterward, there's a new moon. Now, this is a big new moon because this new moon falls in Virgo, while Mercury, the ruler and exaltation lord of Virgo, is also in Virgo. Mercury's direct, gaining power, gaining strength, about to gain a ton of dignity when it goes out of Leo and enters Virgo. And so you're thinking about a strong Virgoan theme here coming in. But this new moon in Virgo is opposite Neptune in Pisces. So you're going to have this really strong effect from Neptune. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, the Virgo new moon with Mercury is going to emphasize earthy things and mercurial things, whether that's learning or perfecting a craft, paying attention to details or organization, getting practical things done, going down that to-do list, making sure that things are pure and efficient, being thoughtful and careful, perfecting something, or sharpening something, being critical and discerning, being thoughtful and mindful. These are the Virgoan energies that will be coming through with the new moon. However, the opposition to Neptune in Pisces, of course, brings up the contrary Piscean themes: faith, surrender, alternate states of consciousness, other worlds or otherworldliness, mystery, imagination, fantasy. Of course, Neptune also brings in the shadow side, you could say, of delusion, deception, wearing rose-colored glasses, not being able to tell the difference between fact and fiction. And then you have the shadow sides of Virgo, which could be overly critical, overly fussy, too practical and not imaginative enough, dry, rigid, inflexible, and too heady or rational. So these energies are opposing one another, and every opposition, of course, the way that Robert Schmidt, who's he's one of the main translators of the ancient Hellenistic astrological texts, talked about oppositions was in relation to Platonic theory. And the way that Platonists looked at oppositions, you could say, was in terms of between opposites, was in terms of there either being more tension or more relaxation between the opposites. The tension or relaxation was always constant. So you're either more and more and more tense between opposites, or it's relaxing relatively. But there's always some level of tension, either more tense or more relaxed. But the dichotomy is always at work, kind of. It doesn't ever fully resolve. However, that tension and relaxation back and forth is thought to birth a third. The two in opposition and the tension between them eventually has the capability of birthing something. So there can be a creative moment in this new moon on September 9th where there is something being born, or there is the creative tension between these themes of Virgo and Pisces that we've been mentioning, or Neptune and Mercury, or the analytical, irrational, or the imaginative and fantastical, the faith-based versus the rational, the practical versus the irrational or the imaginative. Like these tensions can pull us apart. They can create some pain and some suffering or some struggles, but they can also yield something creatively productive for us. So you watch those, look for those themes in a sort of tense relationship, more or less tense and potentially creative, around September 9th. Then on September 12th, we have Venus in Scorpio, and this is big because this transit is foreshadowing Venus's retrograde in October, which we'll talk about next month. But this transit, Venus goes into Scorpio. She's now in Mars's sign, so that's her exile. It's like being in a country that's very different from your own. I often say being in exile would be like if you were, like you're placed in a, long ago, like in the time when the North and South was really divided in the United States, it would be like, if you were a Northerner having to go down South and just deal with the clash of culture and political and social and cultural conflicts that were going on. You're in oppositional territory, because Venus's natural opposite signs are the signs of Mars. So Taurus, Venus's sign, opposite Scorpio, Mars's sign. Libra, Venus's sign, opposite Aries, Mars's sign. So when Venus enters Scorpio in September, there's going to be the theme of Venus becoming more Mars-like and struggling to figure out how to be and do things the way she wants to do them while hanging out in the god of war's house. Right? It's not easy for Venus. She has to do some maneuvering. Of course, great things can come from that tension. Wonderful things, spiritual learning, different kinds of learning and growth in relationships, art that's beautiful. So, but the tension is there, and it's part of what Venus is working on in Scorpio. Now, when Venus enters Scorpio, immediately it will oppose Uranus in Taurus. So Venus opposite Uranus in Taurus is a very sort of sexually provocative transit, potentially, or artistically provocative, because you have the goddess opposing the rebel. So Uranus is rebellious, creative, original, eccentric, likes to think outside of the box. Also, though, Uranus disturbs the status quo and can be very shocking and sudden and unexpected, and sometimes not in a super likable way. So that all of that energy coming through, let me turn off my phone here, it's vibrating. All of that energy that's coming through from Uranus and Venus simultaneously, again in an opposition where the idea is tension between these themes. So typically the way that would play out is sudden disruptions in relationships, any kind of relationship, sudden disruption in places where there's supposed to be harmony. You've already got Venus entering Mars's sign, conflict, and then opposing Uranus, the rebel. Breaking in relationships or from relationships, or having some theme of independence, individuality, I'm going to do it my own way, I don't care if there's a conflict, all of which are challenging for Venus, and add in that opposition to rebellious, disruptive Uranus, you have some potentially really sort of disruptive energies for relationships, for trying to make a deal or trying to compromise with somebody. It's not easy to do that when those two planets oppose. However, it can also be very progressive and innovative and inventive with regard to things like art, beauty, it's non-traditional sexual or relational dynamics, and it's about advocating for things in relationships or on behalf of other people or marginalized people. It's women and the rights of women and women's empowerment. So there's other elements of Venus opposite Uranus that could be not likely to be lacking energy or like some fight and some sense of controversy maybe, but could be very empowering. So that's Venus-Uranus. Now, 6 days later, on September 18th, Mars in Aquarius, back into Aquarius, is going to be going back through the same degrees that it passed over in its retrograde motion all summer. And as it does that, it's going to be entering into a square with Uranus and Taurus right away. So now you have the god of war hitting Uranus again for the third time basically since May. In middle of May, Mars entered Aquarius just as Uranus entered Taurus, and the two squared each other. Then you had Mars going retrograde throughout the summer, and as it went retrograde, it came back right about the week my daughter was born. It was like the first week of August. We had end of July, beginning of August, there was another Mars-Uranus square, this time by retrograde. Now it's backed into Capricorn, and it's turned direct here in the past week, and now it's moving forward, and it's going to cover the same degrees in Aquarius that it did before, with a third and final square to Uranus. So Mars-Uranus is about defiance and rebellion and breakthroughs and forcing change. It's about assertiveness and defiance and originality. It's about being eccentric and sort of a word that Ren Butler uses that I like in his book, The Archetypal Universe, is swashbuckling. It's a good one for Mars Uranus. It has a swashbuckling quality to it where it's kind of youthful and enthusiastic, but also sort of dangerous and risky, sort of impulsive, maybe even a little bit reckless. You do have to be careful with Mars Uranus square for being accident prone or being somewhat impulsive and like, let's just do it, and who cares about the consequences. We've all been working with Mars retrograde over the summer, and Mars retrogrades often get into territory that has to do with effectiveness versus ineffectiveness, potency versus impotency. And those tensions with Mars, anger, frustration, willfulness, inability to use your will effectively, or restraining the will, inability to restrain the will, those kinds of issues with Mars retrograde have been prominent all summer long. With Uranus in the mix, of course, there's been that theme of let's think outside the box, let's destroy the old structure, let's come up with something totally new and different. So you combine those energies once more in September, around September 18th, and you have a pretty dramatic, and it's very yang centric. It's super a punch of yang energy, really. Even though Uranus is in Taurus, Uranus is super yang. So at any rate, at least that's how I see it. Some people may differ with me on that, but you can, at least I would say that around September 18th, you want to look for that desire to use a kind of forcefulness and will and effort and energy to break through barriers, but you want to be careful of not burning bridges, being reckless, being too forceful or aggressive, being so defiant that you break something in the process, basically. But think also about what a great time it's going to be sort of inventive and maybe daring. So the next transit after that I'm focusing on this month happens between September 22nd and 23rd, and this is the autumn equinox. So the fall equinox sets the tone for the entire season to come. That's why we look at equinoxes and solstices and pay a lot of attention to them. Well, the sun entering the sign of Libra in and of itself is not, I like to look at charts for equinoxes and solstices, mundane charts to see where the ingress is going to be at high noon, what place in the world that might be a featured place in the world, stuff like that. Not something that I usually do much of. But I will say that the sun entering Libra means that the sun is entering its fall. It's exalted in the beginning of spring, in its fall in the beginning of fall. That's why we call it fall. So the sun is now falling down into the half of the year, the yin half of the year, where there'll be more darkness than there is light in the 24-hour period. So what does that mean for us? Well, first of all, it can mean that there's a more reflective quality coming. It's time to go inward. It's time to just start taking stock of where we've been and drawing things inward. It's a good time. There's spring cleaning. There's also fall cleaning. Sometimes fall cleaning has more to do with cleaning up your mind, cleaning up your ideas, starting to ground more and come in from the more active, busy, yang space of the summer and spring. So that's just a couple of things to think about. But the other thing that's really important is just as the sun enters Libra, it will immediately enter into a square with Saturn in Capricorn. That can be a moment where there are some really strong things coming up around paternity or the paternal or male or masculine figures, fathers, grandfathers, men in your life. And so there's more, but those topics can become acute. Specifically, the authority of men, whether it's rigid or grandfatherly, or is it helpful and instructive, or is it too rigid and harsh? Those are things that can come up with Sun square Saturn. There's also a kind of moment of creative contraction where there is the sun wants to bring this kind of creative life force to bear on the situation. Saturn, of course, is more contractive and wintry, which means that there might be a consolidation of creative energy or kind of contractive creative moments. Sometimes that's exhausting. Sometimes there's a lot of hard work that's involved, or there's certain elements of sometimes you get sick, you get a cold. Your light sun is sort of dimmed by the heaviness and restrictiveness of Saturn. It's a little bit of a heavy moment with Sun Saturn there. It wouldn't be surprising to see in the news around that time in September, for example, typically on aspects like that, I'm used to seeing, like John McCain, who just passed with the Venus-Pluto dynamic. Sun Saturn, sometimes you also see famous men, older men, passing away, or you see issues surrounding the downfall of men, where there's Saturnine as a kind of lord of karma, and the sun coming together is kind of like men meeting with the law of karma. But anyway, legalistic or authoritarian themes could be prominent, or you could also see elements of becoming more disciplined or more focused creatively. But there's a kind of inward stoic feeling to this transit as well. So at any rate, those are some things that I have on my list of what to watch for around the fall equinox. From there, the last transit of the month that I want to talk is September 24th into the 25th. There's a full moon. Now this full moon is creating a T-square with Saturn, so it's right in there with what I was just talking about. Some of the same themes are involved. The full moon is going to be in Aries, which is Mars ruled, and really, again, is emphasizing the themes of Mars that have been really prevalent. And this, you'll have Mars back in Aquarius going through its direct motion, some opportunity to integrate some Mars themes around this full moon. So what have you been working on with Mars? Desire, action, taking charge, maybe frustration or anger, will, power versus disempowerment, potency, again, versus something that doesn't work or is impotent. And then you think of those themes being really illuminated by the full moon in Aries. But again, you have the oppositional force from the Sun and Mercury at the same time in Libra. So there you have the themes of balance, harmony, accord with others, beauty, the Venetian themes of Libra. And it's a little bit more sophisticated intellectually than Aries tends to be. So, kind of might versus mind themes on the full moon. And then again, T-square to both the sun and the moon is Saturn in Capricorn. Saturn in Capricorn is the focal point of the T-square, is emphasizing, that there's a serious quality. There's issues of maturity, sobriety, respect, dignity, authority, age, maturity, seriousness, commitment, focus, discipline, but also ignorance, decline, blockages, rigidity, stubbornness, being overly cautious or conservative, or being controlling. So those, you can feel like just this T-square of a full moon that's taking place basically right as the autumn equinox passes through. It's very strong this year. So you got your new moon opposite Neptune, your full moon with a T-square, and Saturn's in the mix. It's, even though eclipse season is over, these new and full moon is not messing around in September. These are some pretty dynamic energies. But you see, in a T-square, one of the things to think about is Saturn has to be integrated or incorporated, or Saturn represents the decision that has to be made, or the balancing factor that somehow has to be included. That would, again, that would tend to be about caution, being a little bit more conservative, and conservative doesn't just mean, we're not talking about politics necessarily, right? Conservative means like conserving your energy, or drawing inward, or being more contained, or having better boundaries, or being more committed, defining things a little bit more clearly. Those are Saturn gifts as well. But Saturn at the focal point of that T-square is really going to be saying, like, okay, you have a decision to make between these energies, or you're trying to figure out something, and Saturn is sort of the voice of, old wise Saturn, the voice of wisdom, or possibly the voice that is, representing someplace you're getting stuck. But that'll probably be the focal point energy around the full moon. So that comes around on September 24th into the 25th. So that's what I've got for you guys for the month of September. I hope that this was interesting. I'll look and take questions. I see one from Romani asking how is it for Libra, and I would just point you toward the video horoscopes on my YouTube page, and you can listen to the video that I did for Libra to check out how all of this will apply to Libra in particular. And any of you can do that for your sign as well. So you can, if you go to my YouTube channel, just search Adam Elenbaas on YouTube, and you can watch about 15 to 20-minute video on your sun or rising sign for the month ahead that'll break down what solar houses it's falling into your chart and how it might affect you personally. You can also read the column on astrograph.com. Charlene says, dang, I have Venus and Scorpio opposite Uranus, square Mars for my natal chart, so going to work on some old and new BS. Yeah, well, you kind of know that one because you have it in your birth chart. So, you should be no stranger to some of those energies, yeah. Betty likes a transit with charm, yeah. Charming transits are fun. The beginning of the month, really, with the Mercury-Venus sextile is pretty nice for, just working things out, or just having that kind of natural, I like you, let's just do the deal kind of thing, or whatever. So Jessica says, because it's the best month. Of course, Jessica's a Virgo. Oh, happy Virgo season to everyone out there right now. It's your birthday season. Good morning. Nice to see some of you. Video horoscopes are great, and you can see the charts. It's cool. Very cool. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, well, that's what I've got for you guys. I don't see any more questions, so I'll leave it here. I hope that you all have a very beautiful month of September. We'll be taking a look at all of these transits throughout the month in my regular video blogs, so we'll have a chance to go into all of them. And as always, we'll bring some spiritual things to meditate on as we go. One thing I'll give you a sneak preview of, our yoga studio is about to start a challenge for the fall season called Sweetness Not Sugar. And it's basically going to be a challenge for anyone who wants to join us, our yoga studio audience, but I'm going to be putting it out there for you guys as well. We're going to be, over the course of 21 days, we're going to be issuing 21 sort of informational pieces about why too much sugar in your diet is incredibly destructive. And we'll be encouraging people to try not eating super sugary sweets. Not obviously, you can't totally eliminate sugar from your diet in this world for the most part, but sugary sweets, we'll be taking an elimination diet for 21 days and just reflecting on how it feels to have sugar kind of not in the palate all the time. And that's a good thing, a good way of clearing your mind. And when your mind is clear, you do much better astrology. So that's coming. That'll be coming around the fall equinox. How's vacation going? Enjoying the sunrises? Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been able to get out every morning for my meditation and chanting on the beach here. We're in North Carolina in the Outer Banks, and I've been walking up and down the beach in the morning for like a couple hours chanting and like watching the sunrise come up, and it's like so glorious. I'm feeling so thankful for the opportunity to be here. We actually typically could not afford coming to a place like this, but we actually got randomly, we were like talking about, just as Jupiter got into the trine with Neptune, so watery, we randomly got this coupon for the Outer Banks and got a really cheap rental cottage for a week, not too far from the beach. And so we were able to do it. And Ashley's on maternity leave, and I work from home on my computer. So it's like, well, I'll just work there. I'm like, we'll hang out at the beach for the week. So it worked out. It was really cool. But I've been feeling super blessed to be able to walk on the beach and chant and pray every morning and just sort of center my day that way. It's also been amazing to see the astrology at night and in the morning. You can see just like horizon to horizon, the whole track of the ecliptic and all the planets that are out in the night sky right now, and the moon, and it's been really cool. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity. And of course, if you follow me on Instagram, I've been posting pictures of the ocean every morning too. So, all right. So we will catch up with you guys soon. have a great weekend, everyone. Take care.